Moving to item 12.1, the first of the items for determination from the staff, modification application 744 Bombay Road, Bombay, near Braidwood. Seconded, Councillor Hicks. You wish to speak? Councillor Winchester. Councillor Hicks.
I think this popped up on our radar a few years ago, but it'd be nice to sell it.
Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, sorry, I have to speak. And I'm afraid I need to speak against the motion as it stands for the following reasons. Look, I'm entirely supportive of the position that the staff have taken with regard to the amount of time this has taken. It's been really quite frustrating, and I do agree, and I think the former Palarang councillors all agreed unanimously that the burden associated with the construction of the road was rather onerous and perhaps unnecessary in this case. The reason for deferring the matter back in May of 2014 was to allow the applicant to explore alternative options to satisfy the requirement to provide concurrent legal and practical access to the property. The issue that exists here is that the road as it stands deviates, the road which provides access to the applicant's property deviates from the Crown Reserve in a number of places, most significantly across a piece of private land. If people have read the report, they'll be familiar with the fact that there is another development beyond that particular point that was given approval in spite of the fact that that development did not have coinciding legal and practical access. And this fact only came to light, I guess, after the event when this particular case appeared. The staff realised that there had been an oversight in that regard, and in fact that dwelling now exists in an environment where it does not have coinciding legal and practical access, and that potentially presents a problem for the owner of that property when it comes time to sell the property, because as we saw, I think, in a case that we dealt with only in the last month or so, somebody bought a property that didn't have coinciding legal and practical access, and having bought the property suddenly discovered they didn't have access to their property. So the need to ensure that any development has coinciding legal and practical access is, first of all, it's enshrined in our planning legislation. So it exists in the Talaganda LEP, under which this modification, or under which the original DA and this modification were assessed. That's point 21, item 2C of the 2C1 of the Talaganda LEP says that there will be adequate coinciding legal and practical vehicular access available to the dwelling house. So that's the condition which staff were originally seeking to satisfy by requiring the applicant to construct a road on the Crown Reserve. When the matter was deferred in May, Council agreed that there were other alternatives available which would potentially be less costly, which would almost certainly be less costly. In particular, having the applicant simply negotiate a right of carriageway with the owner of the property across which the road deviates from the Crown Reserve. At the time, there was no indication, and since there still has been no indication, that the owner of that property has any problem with people having access across the property or any problem with arranging a right of carriageway. Obviously, there's some paperwork involved and a cost involved. But the issue at the time was that this is not a council issue. It's not a council problem. Council can't negotiate the right of carriageway for the applicant. The applicant must negotiate with the owner of the land and must seek to have the right of carriageway placed on the title for the land in question. And that's not something that council can interfere with. Council and a number of councillors did offer their assistance to the applicant to do whatever they could to negotiate with department, with anybody, or to facilitate matters within council, but it would appear that over the intervening 4 years nothing's happened. My own notes indicate that the last communication I had with the applicant was in about 2015, and at that point there was no indication of an interest in pursuing a right of carriageway. So look, without wanting to go on any further, and I'll just state, as I said, I do support precisely what the staff have said, but I suggest that there is a more appropriate solution to this problem, because simply allowing the modification will allow what is essentially an illegal development to occur. The difference between the illegal development that was allowed by council and this one is that council didn't realise in the first case that it was an illegal development. Now there is quite significant documentation about the fact that what we would do if we approved this modification would be illegal. And so it concerns me that as a councillor, as somebody making this decision, I would be exposed, because while the original application was made without knowledge of this requirement, this modification, if accepted, will be made in the full knowledge that we are actually accepting a modification that is illegal. So that's the concern that I have. And on that basis, I won't be supporting the motion, and I would just foreshadow a contrary motion if the motion doesn't get up, and simply state that the modification be refused. I think that's the most appropriate course of action in this case, and I believe that if the modification was refused, staff could communicate to the applicant that council would be very happy to work with them to do everything they can to find an alternative solution, be that assist with the right of carriageway, or the other alternative, which is probably the best long-term solution, would be to realign the road boundary with the existing road. That's something that involves a bit of fiddling, again involves both of the owner of the property and the owner of the applicant for this modification. I can see the General Manager poised on his button, so I'll leave it at that and just foreshadow the contrary motion that the modification be refused. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison has just raised some issues of legality, so I'll have to refer it to the General Manager.
I was going to invite Mr Thompson to respond to some of the views expressed.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, it's a difficult one, there's no doubt about that. So the applicant presently has legal access. The road just doesn't go through that legal access. So he has legal access, but he has practical access. Unfortunately, the two don't coincide. If council was to approve this application, the likelihood is that there are a couple of scenarios that could play out. It could continue on exactly like it has continued on for several years until the issue is questioned and somebody has to resolve the issue one way or the other. Because there are several properties involved with the access road, resolving the issue specifically for this person in terms of creating a right-of-way over the access track, the existing access track, solves the problem for him, but not for any of the other people that use that access track. So Councillor Harrison's suggestion that ultimately creating the road within the road reserve is the ultimate solution is probably correct. The question is who pays for that, and how do we convince all the stakeholders involved that they need to contribute to that. There is a risk with this that if council approves it, there may be some view, and I'm not suggesting because I'm not a legal expert, but there may be some view that council, by approving it, has in some way given its imprimatur to the road not being in the reserve, but there is nothing in that decision that prevents the person going back and still negotiating a right-of-way or relocating the road in any case, either individually or as a group. If we refuse the application, the risk to council is that we could have an appeal, and we may not, it doesn't matter what the outcome of the appeal is, there'll be some costs involved with that appeal. So there's risk to council either way. Because it's been such a long-standing issue, the staff believe that this is the best way forward. We're actually recommending the status quo, if you like, in terms of access. And I don't envy the decision that has to be made.
Mr Thompson, if the motion was carried, would the addition of the notion that the applicant be encouraged to negotiate the right-of-way on the current road, would that make clear council's intent that responsibility rests with the applicant?
I think it would. Whether or not council wanted to expand that to ask council to facilitate that on behalf of all the owners, which might share the cost of that, perhaps that's something that we could facilitate as well.
Can we just have some words around that suggestion for the mover of the motion?
So it'll be number 3, that the applicant be encouraged. Oh, you're there already. It's very good. To negotiate right of way on the existing road, and council facilitate those discussions on behalf of relevant stakeholders.
I just quickly ask a question. Here is council, is the wording correct there? Is council in a position to facilitate or just to assist in?
So the mover's indicated happy to accept that. Seconder, happy. Councillor Bray.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison made a point, more than once actually, that the recommendations as presented would put us into an illegal situation. I got that essence from what was being said. Does the amendment in any way therefore obviate that particular issue and therefore remove any legal impediment, knowing legal impediment that might now apply, including or notwithstanding paragraph 3, additional?
Sorry, through Mr Mayor, as Mr Thompson indicated, this retains the status quo, but Mr Thompson, would you like to add more to that?
No, I have nothing else, Mr Mayor.
Good. I know I'm allowed, but does that satisfy in the sense that Councillor Harrison?
Well, given this is a formal council meeting, there's not an opportunity for discussion, but if I may pose another question, and that being that the status quo, as I understand it, would be the development application without the modification. The modification would change the status quo. Is that correct?
Mr Thompson.
Yeah, through Mr Mayor, the status quo would be that the existing access track that is utilised to access that property and the other properties is presently located in and out of the existing road reserve. So that's the status quo that I refer to.
If I can just ask another question. I accept that that is the status quo, and I guess Councillor Bray's question then is the status quo legal with respect to approving a dwelling on that lot?
Mr Thompson.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd be prepared to take that question on notice and get legal advice if that is council's wish to do that. But I'm not in a position to give that legal advice tonight.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was going to propose something similar to that third paragraph, but I was going to make it a little bit more broad, not narrow it, restrict it to the right of negotiate a right of way. At the briefing yesterday, there were other suggestions, at least, like moving the road reserve, and council may be in a position to assist with that, or facilitate that in a way that the applicant may not be. And also potentially, the other option, although it's likely far too expensive, is to reconstruct the road within the road reserve. Council has the equipment to do that, but obviously it would have to do it at the applicant's expense. So I wondered if there was an appetite to amend the third paragraph to allow for other solutions, and perhaps it might be as simple as be encouraged to negotiate the right of way on the existing road. Oh, sorry, already typed, or relocate the road reserve.
Something prepared earlier.
This would be for the mover and seconder at this stage. It's just been inserted. It might need to be underlined to make it obvious. Highlighted.
Right.
Question?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Would accepting this this amended recommendation, given the unknowns about the future and so on, place us in any form of situation from a legal point of view?
Through Mr Mayor, as Mr Thompson had indicated, we're not in a position to provide that legal advice, and if councils were of a view that they were concerned about that, then the matter could be deferred to obtain that advice if you wished.
So any further discussion? Otherwise I'll ask the move for the motion to conclude any discussion. Happy to pass over? Well, I'll put the motion then. All those in favour? Against?
Harrison.
Councillor Harrison, Councillor Bray, Councillor Taylor.
Okay. So.
Councillor Schweikert abstain. I'll declare the motion carried.